Manipulation is one of the most complex and misunderstood aspects of human psychology. It is not just about deception, persuasion, or control. It is about understanding the subtle ways people influence others, sometimes deliberately, sometimes unconsciously, and sometimes with the intention to harm. In everyday life, manipulation is everywhere. It happens in relationships, workplaces, friendships, politics, social media, and even in family dynamics. While manipulation is not always malicious, it becomes harmful when it violates boundaries, overrides free will, or emotionally exploits another person. To truly understand manipulation, you need to explore the psychological principles behind it. How human emotions can be shaped, how perceptions can be redirected, how guilt and fear can be triggered, and how the human brain often responds more to emotion than logic. This piece goes deeply into the emotional, cognitive, and behavioral foundations of manipulation, why people use it, and how it affects those who experience it. At its core, manipulation works because humans are wired for connection, trust, and emotional sensitivity. People want to be understood, supported, validated, and loved. Manipulators recognize these vulnerabilities and use them as psychological levers. For example, someone who fears abandonment can be subtly controlled by threats of withdrawal. Someone who desires approval may become overly compliant when flattered. Someone who is deeply empathetic may be easily overwhelmed by guilt. These vulnerabilities are natural, but in the hands of someone skilled in manipulation, they become tools of influence. One of the most well-known psychological foundations behind manipulation is emotional conditioning. Emotional conditioning works by associating certain feelings with specific behaviors, creating predictable responses. A manipulator might reward someone with affection when they behave in a certain way, then withdraw affection when the behavior changes. Over time, the other person begins to chase the positive emotional reward and fear the emotional punishment. This creates a cycle of dependence where the manipulated person feels responsible for maintaining the manipulator's emotional stability. This kind of conditioning often appears in toxic relationships, where affection and hostility alternate unpredictably, leaving the victim confused and emotionally drained. Another powerful technique is gaslighting, a strategy that directly attacks a person's sense of reality. Gaslighting works by creating doubt in one's memory, perception, judgment, and even sanity. A manipulator may deny things that actually happened, twist events, minimize harmful actions, or shift blame onto the victim. When someone repeatedly questions your version of reality, you begin to internalize their version instead. The psychological impact is devastating. Lowered self-confidence, emotional confusion, and a growing dependence on the manipulator for clarity. Gaslighting thrives in emotional imbalance. The more the victim feels insecure, the more power the manipulator gains. Manipulators also rely heavily on projection. Projection involves accusing others of behavior or intentions that the manipulator themselves possesses. Instead of admitting their flaws or mistakes, they shift the blame outward. This not only protects their self-image, but also destabilizes the other person emotionally. When you are constantly accused of things you didn't do, you find yourself defending, explaining, and proving yourself. This defensive position puts the manipulator in control. Projection is frequently used by people with fragile egos, deep insecurities, or narcissistic tendencies. A more subtle manipulation technique is strategic vulnerability. This occurs when a manipulator deliberately displays weakness, sadness, or helplessness to elicit sympathy or obedience. Instead of direct confrontation, they use emotional appeal to bypass logic. They may cry, act distressed, or portray themselves as victims of circumstances or other people. The goal is to make the other person feel responsible for their emotional well-being. Empathetic individuals are especially vulnerable to this technique because their natural response is to help, comfort, and protect. Over time, they begin to sacrifice their own needs to preserve the manipulator's emotional stability. Fear is another powerful psychological tool. Manipulators often use fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of punishment, or fear of conflict to gain compliance. The fear doesn't have to be loud or aggressive. It can be subtle. A manipulator might say, "If you loved me, you wouldn't do that," implying that disobedience equals emotional abandonment. They may create consequences, even unspoken ones, that keep the other person walking on eggshells. Fear narrows the victim's emotional world, limiting their choices and deepening their dependence. Flattery and love bombing are the opposite side of the same coin. Instead of fear, they use overwhelming affection, praise, or admiration to create emotional dependency. Love bombing feels intoxicating at first. Endless attention, gifts, compliments, promises, and affection. But the intention behind it is control. Once the victim is emotionally attached, the manipulator slowly withdraws the affection and uses the threat of losing that affection to maintain power. Love bombing is common in the early stages of toxic relationships and can quickly trap people who crave emotional closeness. Manipulation also frequently uses guilt as a psychological weapon. Guilt is a powerful motivator because humans are social beings who want to avoid hurting others. Manipulators exploit this by portraying themselves as victims or by exaggerating how deeply they've been wronged. They may say things like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me," or, "I guess I'm just not important to you." These statements are designed to induce guilt and shame, making the victim more likely to comply to relieve those feelings. Over time, the guilt-driven compliance becomes a routine pattern, giving the manipulator consistent power. Another manipulation strategy involves withholding affection, communication, support, or approval. Silent treatment, emotional distance, and selective attention are all forms of control. When a manipulator withholds, they create emotional scarcity. Humans naturally move toward emotional resolution, so the victim becomes increasingly anxious and tries harder to restore harmony. The manipulator, knowing this, uses withdrawal to shape behavior. This technique thrives in relationships where the victim fears abandonment or disapproval. Manipulators also use selective truth, half-truths, or distorted facts. They rarely lie blatantly because blatant lies can be challenged. Instead, they mix truth with deceit, creating confusion. By offering just enough truth to sound credible, they make it harder for the victim to distinguish reality from manipulation. This blend of truth and distortion creates cognitive dissonance, a state where conflicting thoughts make a person emotionally unsettled and more susceptible to influence. Another common technique is the creation of dependency. Manipulators often position themselves as the only person who truly understands, cares, or supports the victim. They isolate the victim from other sources of emotional support. Over time, the victim feels increasingly dependent on the manipulator for validation, safety, and emotional connection. This dependency is powerful because it reshapes the victim's identity around the relationship. They begin to believe they cannot cope without the manipulator. Some manipulators use intellectual dominance. They overwhelm the other person with complex explanations, logic, or reasoning that makes the victim feel intellectually inferior. When someone feels consistently outsmarted or confused, they become less confident in their judgment and more willing to defer to the manipulator's perspective. Intellectual manipulation often appears in workplace environments, academic contexts, or relationships where one person has more knowledge, experience, or verbal skill. Manipulation can also take the form of future faking. In this technique, the manipulator makes promises about the future to gain compliance in the present. They may talk about long-term commitment, shared dreams, or future success, but without intention to follow through. These promises create hope, and hope is a powerful emotional anchor. Victims stay in harmful situations because they believe the future will eventually match the promises. An often overlooked technique is moral manipulation. This happens when the manipulator frames their desires as moral obligations. They may portray themselves as morally superior or accuse the victim of being selfish, unkind, or irresponsible if they don't comply. By reframing the situation as a moral issue rather than a personal one, the manipulator gains psychological high ground. People who have strong moral values or empathy are especially vulnerable to this form of manipulation. Social manipulation is another form that appears in group settings. Here, the manipulator uses social pressure, alliances, gossip, or exclusion to control others. They may influence a group's perception of someone, making that person feel isolated or misunderstood. Social manipulation thrives in environments with high power dynamics like workplaces, classrooms, or friend groups. Ultimately, manipulation works because it exploits fundamental human needs. The need to be loved, the need to belong, the need to feel secure, the need for self-esteem, and the need to avoid pain. People susceptible to manipulation are not weak, they are human. They care, they feel deeply, and they seek emotional connection. Manipulators exploit these qualities because they understand how powerful emotions are in shaping behavior. Understanding manipulation is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It is about becoming more aware of emotional patterns, setting healthier boundaries, and recognizing when influence crosses into control. Awareness is the first step toward emotional autonomy. When you understand manipulation, you become less susceptible to it. You learn to reshape your emotional responses, reclaim your self-trust, and protect your mental space. Manipulation thrives in silence, confusion, and self-doubt. It weakens when you name it, question it, and recognize the tactics behind it. Knowledge gives you clarity, clarity gives you power, and power gives you freedom.